Hi everyone, welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige. So, lots to get into this week. If you don't follow me on social media, I took last week off. My mom had surgery last Friday. That was unexpected, and I wasn't feeling like I wanted to put pressure on myself and take more time away from my family than was really necessary and that I needed to do. So that was why there was no episode this past Monday. So now everything's shifted by a week, essentially. But we'll get back on the solo guest cadence after this week. And then also, because of my mom's surgery, my trip in July got pushed until September. So for now, July will be staying the same with guest solo, and then we'll see where we are for September. I do have a Substack piece coming out on July 1st about feeling patriotic on the 4th of July, and especially when it's 250th anniversary of the founding of this country, and how that's complicated, but there's still kind of bits and pieces of hope. If you can't tell, I'm trying very hard to kind of hope core myself and hope pill myself. I don't know if it's working. We'll see. I feel like that piece is just me trying to convince myself that like everything's fine. It's not. But yeah, that's kind of all I have on the housekeeping front. I guess bottom line is that everything is going back to normal, and hopefully by September I'll have guest episodes lined up so there won't be any misses. And it feels weird to have taken an unexpected week off, but I'm happy to be back and get right into it. So this week we're talking about a few things. Congress finally pushed back on Trump. New York had their primaries. That was a big night last night. I'm recording this on Wednesday the 24th. The Deflecting pool is quite literally melting. The White House lawn is destroyed, and the Iran deal is looking suspiciously familiar. And also, the Supreme Court is coming around on decision time. So there are a few that have come down, but there are also a few that have not yet been decided that are arguably the most critical to living in this country. But yeah, so let's get into it. So first off, I want to talk about Congress pushing back against Trump, which was kind of a shock just because there were some Republicans that had split with him. So those senators included some familiar faces at this point to people that are open in their opposition to Trump, but it was Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul. So four of them broke with Trump. Trump obviously immediately got online and started hooting and hollering about them, but they appear to have stood firm. The other thing that was interesting in that vote is that there were two Republicans, Mitch McConnell, who I'm pretty positive is hospitalized, and Dave McCormick. They missed the vote, meaning the vote passed 50 to 48. So there was only 98 votes. And the other thing is that John Fetterman, because why not, voted against it. We don't have time to psychoanalyze that, but I guess the big part in this is that Republicans are starting to finally get a backbone. I think midterms are coming up. They're starting to see that this is not popular. People's gas prices are rising. They're still up. I filled up my tank today. Granted, it was like pretty much a full tank, and the total price was $45.99. That's a problem. That's close to $50. That's a lot of money. But also, there's nothing really unique about these senators. Like Susan Collins is facing a tough re-election in Maine, but also she defended her vote on it by basically saying that rules are rules, and the 60-day deadline for Congress to either authorize or not authorize war is a rule that needs to be followed. That was her kind of backing behind it. Bill Cassidy basically said, fuck you. He's always not really like Trump. He was one of the Republicans that voted to convict him in the 2021 impeachment, and he didn't win re-election. So I think at this point he's probably thinking all bets are off. Like let's go crazy. And he did say that, quote, "This is the worst foreign policy blunder in decades," which like, sing it, Bill Cassidy, love you. Murkowski of Alaska basically said her kind of reasoning has been like, money. Like Alaska's facing the economic crisis due to the war in Iran a lot harder than I think a lot of other U.S. communities are. But she basically said that last month that she was supporting measures to end hostilities and bring our people home. And then there was Rand Paul. Rand Paul was the only Republican for the first resolution that failed, I think, a month ago. He was the only Republican that sided with Democrats to vote to to end this. And so this was not a shock. He hasn't been standing with it since the beginning. Trump obviously didn't take kindly to this. As I said at the top, he immediately wanted to act the senators that voted against it, voted for it. But he basically said, like, I'm getting this done one way or the other. Sir, that's a war crime. Sir, that's not legal. Because they just said, you got to stop. So anyways, the other like kind of kooky thing going on in Congress is that there was a big housing bill passed. And Trump said he's not going to sign it because of his voting rights legislation, you know, the Save America Act or whatever it's called. Mind you, the bill was passed with like overwhelming bipartisan support. And Trump's saying like, no, everybody can go kick rocks, which is, again, crazy to me, given that midterms are it's the end of June, like 4 months away. Like he needs a win. Like Republicans need a win right now, and Trump is just refusing to give like this is being handed to him. He is being handed a win to deliver on that he can brag about and say, my housing policy. He's not taking it. So this these are two issues that like people seem to be willing to come together on, and it's unsurprising that the issues that people are willing to come together on, Trump is immediately like, nope, no, thank you. But I am happy that there still are issues that people can come together on. You know, it makes for a functioning Congress at the very least. Like there is always going to need to be compromised, and you're always going to need senators and representatives that are willing to come together, even though like people that are hyperpartisan, such as myself and such as I feel like a lot of you that listen, are going to look at laws and be like, well, why'd they cut that thing out? Like, that's not fair. That's how our Congress was made, and that's how things need to be in order to get passed. I wish it was different. Like, I wish we had a supermajority, but like, that's not how things work right now. So let's move on to New York. They had their primaries yesterday. They were pretty widely watched. There were also a couple other states that had primaries, including Maryland and Utah. Nothing much out of Maryland or Utah that was like super exciting. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but we'll stick to New York. The most watched races, I think, were New York 12 and New York 17. In New York 17, I had Kate Conley on back in January, I believe. But we'll just do a little roundup of the most watched races. So in 12, that was the one that had Jack Schlossberg, JFK's grandson, if you're unaware, George Conway, who was formerly married to Kellyanne Conway, who was Trump's aide and got COVID at his COVID party, and also Michael Lasher and Alex Boris, who were two state assembly members. That race was widely watched, I think, just because Jack Schlossberg and George Conway threw their hats in the ring. It is also like a Democratic powerhouse district. It's represented by Jerry Nadler, who's represented since 2023, I think. But it basically represents like downtown New York, Manhattan area. Very, very blue. But unsurprisingly, and I talked about this in the Illinois 9 race, there was a lot of internet chatter about what was going on. There was the internet made it seem like Jeff Schlossberg was it. Much in the way, like in Illinois 9, everybody was like, cat, not me. Anyways, internally, like in New York, there was a lot of hype around the current assembly members, which is exactly how the race ended up panning out. Those two assembly members came in first and second, with Schlossberg in, quite frankly, a trailing third. And then everybody else was even lower than that. But I say that to say that you can't believe everything on the internet, even though everybody was hyping up Jeff Schlossberg, especially when he first launched his campaign. I think, his stance on Israel, I think he fumbled through a lot of difficult questions. Like, I just don't think he was ready to run for office. But, like, because it was an open seat, kind of felt like it's now or never. So I understand that, but, like, this was not the race for him. But that seat in particular was won by Lasher, which, perfect, love it. The other one that was closely watched, but not as hyped on social media, was New York 10. So that one, I don't know if you remember the New York City mayoral primary, but there was Zohran Mamdani, who went on to win, and Brad Lander. Brad Lander and Mamdani co-endorsed each other, which was super sweet and awesome. Love that. And Brad Lander then went on to lose, and he now ran a campaign against an incumbent and completely just curb stomped him. Brad Lander walked out with 65.8% of the votes, and Goldman walked out, who was the incumbent, walked out with 34%. Some of their bigger differences, I think, was just the way Brad Lander was speaking to a message of new beginnings and like having fighters in Congress. And that was that. So I'm happy that Bradlander won. I think he was a great mayoral candidate, but it's interesting. I'll get more into like my personal analysis of it in a bit. But the other one was New York 17, which is right outside of New York City. That is currently represented by Mike Lawler. It is a pretty 50-50 district, and in most maps to winning the majority in the House, it includes a Democrat winning in that district. So in that district, it was surprisingly, actually, 3 women running for the seat, and 3 women in the top 3 polling candidates, which I thought was sweet and interesting. But Kate Conley absolutely ran away with it with 49% of the vote. And then the second place person who was Beth Davidson, got 31.9%. So another win in the books for Current Affairs Unfiltered, which is super fun. And I think after following Kate for a while, I think Mike Lawler was immediately threatened by her because he's been tweeting at her for months. Since at least January, he's been tweeting at her and causing a ruckus on Twitter with her. The other thing is all of the candidates that Mamdani backed won. So that included Bradlander in New York 10 that we just talked about, Claire Valdez, who was running in the 7th district, and then I'm totally going to butcher this name. I'm so sorry. Daria Lisa Chevalier. I really hope that's somewhat close to right. I'm so sorry. Who won in New York's 13th district. So these are all people that call themselves Democratic Socialists and people that Mamdani endorsed, and they all won. So there's a couple of trains of thought that I have. So first of all, as I've talked about in episodes before, primaries have a problem of turnout. In each of those districts, roughly 300 to 350,000 people are represented. However, in each of those districts, turnout was only about 20%. And in all of those districts, the primary is basically the general. Like, whoever won that Democratic primary, it is all but guaranteed to win the general unless they die between now and November. And it's interesting to me because when Mamdani won, there was such pushback about Democratic Socialists, they want to make the buses free, they want to raise our taxes, whatever the train of thought was. There, again, online chatter, so this is not on the ground, but online chatter about how bad Democratic Socialists are, what have you. But then when it came to actually run a race for Congress, that same opposition wasn't putting boots on the ground to GOTV, get out the vote for people that agreed with them. So I go back and forth on, the debate today. It's only a day after the primaries, but the debate today is about, is this the direction that people see the Democratic Party going in, is towards democratic socialism? I would argue no. I think, as Bradlander said, I think people are hungry for change. They want something new. They want fighters. And if that is coming in the form of a democratic socialist, people are willing to take a bet on it, to go, yeah, sure. I think Bradlander said this again on CNN yesterday, but people are fed up. People want something new, and Trump was that for the Republican Party. And in a lot of ways, these candidates are that for the Democratic Party. So I could go both ways on it. I think we need people far to the left. We need people in the middle. We need people in between. I also thought it was funny that on CNN yesterday, he was like, progressives are winning all over. Daniel Biss in Illinois 9, I said, we had to bully him. We without bullying, him and Laura Fine would have been besties in the middle. So sure, Bradlander. And then also, while Bradlander was on, the polls closed at 9 p.m. New York time. He was on right at 9 Eastern time, and by 9:11 they had called the race for him while he was on the air. So that was super cute to see and watch him find out that he won. But all of that to say that I don't think you can put a lot of stock in these primaries, or in primaries in general. Again, when turnout is so low and you're talking about 20%, and in these districts, and the district I live in Illinois, and in most blue cities, the primary determines what happens in November. If you are one of those people that's it doesn't matter which way I vote, it doesn't matter if I vote, because it's all the same, and both of them suck, you need to make the change and vote in a primary. That is where you are making the decision and doing something bold and picking who genuinely speaks to you. So I have no sympathy for people that aren't voting and are going to complain about Mamdani-backed candidates winning. Luckily, most of these New York primaries walked away without much of a scandal, unlike Graham Plattner in Maine. So kudos to New York for holding it together. We appreciate you. And we'll see what the makeup of this new Congress is in November. But let's move on to further down the East Coast. Let's go to Washington, D.C., where the reflecting pool is like quite literally melting before our eyes. So it is honestly the best possible metaphor for the current administration. So if you'll recall, a couple months ago, Trump drains the reflecting pool, hires a contractor that is also a friend of his, works on his Mar-a-Lago pool. Again, corruption. Hires an insider that he already knows to drain the pool, fix the cracks, and then he, somewhere along the way, decides that he wants to paint it, and the paint color is called American flag blue. They paint it, they refill it, bada bing, bada boom. Now, if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and seen the reflecting pool, it's one of my favorite places to be. The reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. Some parts of the city are awful. Anyways, the ducks sit in it. There's usually a little bit of algae, nothing atrocious, and it reflects the Washington Monument. The end. It's serene. It's beautiful. It's in Forrest Gump when Jenny runs to Forrest. There was nothing wrong with it in the first place. There were some cracks that I understand needed fixing. You didn't need to do the whole painted American flag blue thing. Within days of refilling the pool and reopening it, there is massive algae, and also the paint is peeling. The brand new American flag blue paint is peeling off of it and like floating in the top of the river. Over this weekend, there was a dead baby duck in the pool. So riddle me that. Trump essentially says, damn, that's crazy. Like, I had nothing to do with that. I don't know what that's about. We, as taxpayers, just paid this company that Trump hired, because he knows them, millions of dollars to make the reflecting pool worse than it was before. Then Trump also shifted into saying that it was vandals that caused the paint to be peeling, and like they ripped up the paint. He said something about there being a 300-foot gash, which a couple weeks ago he said that it would be impossible for anybody to vandalize the reflecting pool. Like, again, nothing is making sense. And that man has no sense of personal responsibility at all. And I just feel like, I understand he doesn't think like a normal and like rational person, but like if you are going to take on a project of that size in which you are altering and allegedly fixing a major American monument and place to visit, I feel like you should be taking all of the precautions necessary and then some to make sure that the project actually works and actually makes the area look more beautiful, perhaps no algae. And rumor has it, so after the algae showed up, they poured a whole bunch of hydrogen peroxide in there. Rumor has it that pouring all the hydrogen peroxide in there to kill the algae also lifted some of the paint too. So this is like a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And again, so just reflective of who Trump is in general, because when anything goes badly, whether it's the reflecting pool, a war, the economy, even if it is like we can put 1 and 2 together and see that it is directly his responsibility and something that he had control over, he is physically unable to locate the responsibility. It's insane. And moving on to other things that Trump has uglified. The White House lawn, which I'm not even going to get. Actually, you know what? I'll entertain it. So the UFC fight happened on the 14th, on Flag Day, aka Trump's birthday, where they set up this big UFC dome, and then every man you've ever met that is bald, fat, and probably has a cocaine problem gathered under it for 4 hours of watching racist fat guys wrestle. That was it. Also, racist, transphobic, all of the icks and ists is what they were, because one of the fighters was like, Michelle Obama is a man, and nobody did anything to correct it. You could kind of see Dana White, who runs UFC, do a little, ooh, ugh, and like take a step back. But like nobody said anything to correct the record. Trump didn't hit he loves to True Social. He never hit a post that was like, actually, that was wrong. So that was a thing. And also the whole like way that Trump was marketing this thing was like America 250, like UFC fight on the lawn. And then it was put behind a paywall on Paramount. Everything is a grift. Everything is a grift. If it was really about like celebrating America and being like UFC is the most American thing possible, it would be available on a non-streaming platform that you didn't have to pay for. I can't. Anyways, fight happens. Mind you, the East Wing is in shambles. Oh my god, I can't. The more I talk about it, the more there's just like everything in DC is broken. I have to go out there in September. I'm gonna be assessing the situation, is all I'm gonna say. So UFC fight happens. Mind you, East Wing torn down. There's rubble in the background. A half mile away, the reflecting pool is peeling as we speak. That is the situation in DC right now. But fight happens. They dismantle the cage arena. I don't even know what to call it. It was like, it kind of looked like in Stranger Things in season 2 when like the big like spider looking thing was the enemy. That was kind of what the UFC cage thing looked like, in my humble opinion. They take it down. Obviously, the grass underneath is ruined, which, side story about my childhood. When I was a kid, my dad wouldn't let me have one of those like kiddie pools, like the little inflatable ones, because when it sits on the lawn, it ruins the grass underneath. And that was like our personal home that like my parents owned. And you mean to tell me Trump popped up this UFC cage and the grass is ruined and we were all just expected to pay for it, I guess? Luckily, thank God, we as taxpayers do not, because a Trump supporter pledged $1 million toward repairs on the lawn. So I guess my big question is, why are private donors funding repairs to damage caused by a overtly political event at a technically public property? So not the biggest scandal of the week, but it certainly captures the increasingly blurry line between public institutions and Trump's political brand and his corruption. And I just can't. I'm so excited. I'm not really that excited because every time I go to DC, I get so sad because this city has lost so much of its character. Like, I loved living there for 2 years under Joey B. City was magical. It was, I can only imagine what it was like under Obama. I loved living there. When I went last February, the first thing I saw when I walked out of my hotel room was 4 National Guard members walking around together in Navy Yard. Mind you want to know who lives in Navy Yard? Hill staffers, Republicans. Anyways, I gotta clock out. But I am so excited to go back there and see, like, I want to go into downtown DC and just take a pulse check. I want to see what's going on down there, because it, like, if you've never been to DC, the White House, the reflecting pool, the White House and the reflecting pool are super close together. The fact that both of them are like literally broken. I was there when the East Wing was torn down. That was like really jarring. But like everything is broken. And Trump wants to sit there and say like, I fix everything. I fix the city. There's no crime. Yeah, there's a crime. It's the buildings. It's the buildings and things that don't look right. Anyways, I'm done beating this horse. I'm done. Not to mention the arch. That's a thing. I haven't talked about that one, I don't think, in a minute, but like that's gonna change the, layout of the city. I can't. Anyways. Let's go across the world. Let's go to Iran. The last few weeks have been a lot of like same old. There's nothing and also everything. But allegedly we signed an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And then JD Vance was supposed to go to Switzerland, I believe, to like hammer out some details. And then as he was getting ready to go to Switzerland, Iran was like, you broke the MOU because Israel is still striking in Lebanon, which, like, we don't have control over Bibi. I'm sorry, Iran. We have no control over that man. Like, and Bibi's mad. Bibi is mad. Whatever. we all at some point get to the table. They start hammering out some details, and the details that come out basically say this is the same deal as the JCPOA signed under Obama. They released money, which Republicans hammered Obama for doing. JD Vance got out there and was like, they're agreeing to independent inspections. Also something that they agreed to while Obama was president and signed the JCPOA. Like, I think I need to go back and rewatch my solo episode from when this first started, because I'm pretty sure I said that all this is going to be is that they're going to bicker and bomb and bicker and bomb. They're going to get to the negotiating table, and Trump's going to sign the same thing that looks like the JCPOA and claim victory. Like, I'm pretty sure I verbatim said that. And here we are. We have virtually the same thing as the JCPOA on the table. Mind you, Trump spent years, if not decades, saying that the agreement was a disaster. Republicans spent years attacking it. It was allegedly one of the worst foreign policy deals ever negotiated. And yeah, here we are. Just makes you think. Like, I don't know, maybe nuclear diplomacy has like certain realities to it that just can't be avoided. Like, I don't understand. And I'm going back to I'm going back to the way when this first started and Trump was like, rise up, everybody, like a Act 1 of Hamilton, like, rise up and take over your government. And that obviously didn't happen. Iran's guard is still in charge. That's still a thing. Meanwhile, people were like, see, he cares about the freedom of women. No, now Trump cares about keeping the same bad guys in power, because that is who signed the deal. The people can't rise up now because the people didn't sign that deal. They would immediately get rid of it. So Trump doesn't care about women. Sorry, this war was for nothing. For the same deal that was in place. Nothing. Nothing is changing. Nothing has changed. Now, here's to hoping, not to make it about me again, here's to hoping that this deal goes through and I can make it to the Middle East in October. I am looking forward to my trip to Dubai. I am, at this point, using all of my PTO in a 6-week time period. But for that reason and that reason alone, I hope they sign something. So let's move back locally to the Supreme Court. So June, if you did not know, is Supreme Court decision time. There are several major decisions that are expected soon. They've already ruled on some as the month has gone on. They ruled that barring drug users from buying guns, this is such a joke, barring people who use drugs from owning guns is inconsistent with the right to bear arms. So if you are addicted to a substance, go out and get yourself a gun. It is your God-given right. So that's a thing. They ruled on Alabama's congressional map, the Mifepristone case. Like, those have all already been decided. But there are a few major ones that have not been decided yet, including, like, and this always happens, like, the most critical ones that would change our lives and, like, the way this country operates almost always don't get decided until the end of the term, which is June, July. So first up is immigration protections for Haitians and Syrians. So the case was about, did the Trump administration take the proper steps in terminating TPS, temporary protective status? That is what his whole immigration crackdown kind of started as for Haitian Syrian immigrants. So they had TPS because both of those countries are very, very unstable. And TBD on that. The other one is going to be about police warrants for personal data. In this case in particular, the law enforcement entities issued a warrant for someone's Google location history and whether it violates the Fourth Amendment. So that's crazy. Anyways, that's being decided on. Then there is, of course, how could we forget, birthright citizenship. That is on the docket. Basically, this was, if you even recall, in response to Trump issued an executive order banning birthright citizenship, and now the Supreme Court needs to decide on it. There's also, this one kind of breaks my heart because I feel like they're gonna rule with Trump on this one, but the question around it is, can the Trump administration turn back migrants as they approach the southern border? And it would bar them from even having the opportunity to claim asylum. So that one's crazy. And another one about voting rights. Again, like, I feel insane even saying this. This one is Watson v. RNC. It is about accepting mail-in ballots after Election Day. So right now, if you drop your ballot in the mail and it is postmarked by Election Day, they have to count it. This case is arguing that tallying in mail-in ballots after Election Day is a no-no, and they seem poised to agree with that. Another one that should be coming down is about Lisa Cook, who was fired by Donald Trump, and she sued them. She's basically claiming that it undermines the independence of the Federal Reserve. I can't even tell you where that one's going to go, but a lot of these people are evil, so I can only guess. This one's also interesting because I could see this going either way, but this one is Wolford et al. Versus Ann E. Lopez, which is the Attorney General of Hawaii. So there's a law in Hawaii that prohibits people from bringing guns into someone else's private property, so their homes, without their consent. The challenge is saying the law is restricting their right to carry and is a no-no with the Second Amendment. So that one's interesting. And then there's obviously the transgender athletes in women's sports. That one is based out of West Virginia. This one's also interesting, again, because I could see it perhaps going either way. But it's limits on political party spending. So the National Republican Senatorial Committee versus the FEC. The question is generally asking, does limiting the amount of money that political parties, so RNC and DNC, can spend in coordination with specific candidates violate the First Amendment? This one's interesting given the decision for Citizens United. I'm eager to see if this goes the same way as that. And yeah, so those are like all pretty major cases that would not, I think, necessarily alter our day-to-day lives, but they certainly have an impact on what the kind of fabric of this country is. And they're asking like really essential and moral questions about who gets power, who gets to vote, who gets to belong, who gets to participate. And those are generally just the questions that are sitting under any political disagreement we have nowadays. But the answers to a lot of these questions are going to shape the political landscape and just landscape of this country in general for years, if not decades. So if you don't keep up on the Supreme Court decisions, I will say that the Washington Post has a great tracker, which is where I got the names for a lot of these cases. They don't update it as much as I think they could. Like right now, I'll put the link to it in the show notes, but right now you can toggle between like decided versus argued versus like cases they've decided in support of Trump, cases they've decided against Trump, whatever. But one of the cases under argued is a case that was decided yesterday, so they're not updating it as frequently as they could be, but it is still very interesting to just read essentially like what the question is that they're arguing, and based on the arguments that have already happened, where does it look like the Supreme Court is tilting towards. So I'll have that in the show notes for reference, but Supreme Court decision day is always a little rough. Oh, God. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys this week. So next week, I'm bringing back Kira from Citizens Impeachment to talk about the candidates that have won and what comes next and all that fun stuff. So that'll be next week, and then we'll get even more guest episodes in the next couple of weeks. I will say that with my mom having surgery and I've been working remotely for this week and next, it's allowed me to have a little bit more time to record guest episodes, so that's super awesome for me. Love that. And we should be good to go. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. To support this podcast, you can also subscribe to my Substack, She Knows the Score, which is linked in the show notes. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to read your Supreme Court decisions. I will see you guys next week.